Hi, everybody, and welcome to another wonderful webinar with Chase Reiner. This is the third one, if I remember rightly. The first two were amazing. I was really impressed by what you brought to the table. Really practical stuff, and I love your style of presenting things as you go along. It's kind of less a presentation and more a demonstration of what you do every day. And today, it's going to be how you increase 10 times traffic and sales every day. And I really liked the description you wrote. I love the bit about the crickets chirping in the background. I think we can all relate to that. Can you just tell us about that? I mean, was that?
Yeah. So I think for me, I started out and I was always trying to figure out ways to grow my traffic and grow my rankings and my sales. And the thing that I was always doing was I was trying to be as technical as possible, and I was using these keywords and using what everybody was telling me to do, like link building, and it just wasn't working for me. So I had to figure out a different way to actually start ranking and start bringing in traffic and bringing in people who are actually wanting to watch what I was doing and interact with me. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk. Yeah.
Yeah, no, so that's what you're going to talk about today. It's that we all create this content. We think it's great, and there are crickets chirping in the background. And you've mastered this. And as we can see from the people below, Laura McAdams, Greg Woodley from Sydney, we've got people from all over the world who are incredible. Oh, Jeannie Hill, hello, Jeannie, who are incredibly interested to hear what you've got to tell us about all this. So we'll let people roll in a little bit. I mean, can you just tell me really quickly, how quickly did you go from non-digital to digital?
Well, I think I've always kind of been digital. I never really. Are you talking about in the sense of physical marketing?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like that conversion from saying, right, okay, I can't make it work on digital to making it work on digital. Was it what, 6 months, a year?
Oh, okay. Before it started working. So yeah, I mean, I think the first couple years I had a really hard time. I started a podcast, I was interviewing people, and that kind of worked. And then I started doing a YouTube channel, but I was only getting a little bit of traction on it. And I started a Facebook group. And I don't think that I was doing necessarily the wrong things. I just wasn't using the right techniques in these different platforms to actually grow what I was doing.
Which is an amazing point. I mean, it is that it's using the right techniques, and also, if I may say so, after 2 years, not giving up, thinking like, what's another angle? How can I look at this differently? And who were your inspirations during those 2 years?
Yeah, I think when I started out, I was following kind of the bigger people like Brian Dean, and I was looking at Tim Solo from Ahrefs, and pretty much anybody that was creating content and getting a ton of views to it. And I think that's how a lot of people start, is they just type in something like SEO or how do I grow my views, and they just find the people at the top and they kind of follow what's going on there. But the real thing that I think that is important to think about is not necessarily what's going to work for the people on the top, but what is working for the people that don't really have the views.
Brilliant stuff. Yeah. I mean, right now, kind of when we search for this kind of thing, you're at the top. And one of the great strengths you have is that you share these practical ideas, the practical applicable ideas. And so now we're going to move into the presentation. I'm going to leave you to it. I like the style of we're looking over your shoulder. Can we look over your shoulder for the next 30 or 40 minutes, Chase?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess we can start with a checklist that I created. Let me bring that up. I'll have to screen share. Give me 1 second so I can do that. What I've been finding though, Jason, is that what works really well is kind of just creating templates that I can automate, because the thing that I've found that, at least with my own stuff, is that the more I'm spending time doing things that are manual, the less time I can spend doing the things that I actually need to be doing, like showing up to something like this. And I think I got my screen share going here. Let me know if you can see this. Can you see this?
Yes, we can. Lots of red.
Yeah. So this is an example of a checklist that I made specifically for YouTube. And I actually have checklists for all kinds of different stuff, like local SEO, YouTube SEO, Facebook. And by the way, I don't know if I can leave descriptions in here, but if you go to chasereiner.com, you'll be able to find a lot of this stuff. I have free versions and I have paid versions. The paid versions are more for step-by-step instructions. These checklists are just mainly for people who kind of already know how to do this, and they just, say, hey, I did this part. I set up my streaming software. I set up my account. So I want to kind of just go into one of these templates for you, because normally we go into the SEO templates. And I think on one of the last ones we were going in, I think it was my SEO audit checklist for websites. But in this stream, I actually want to specifically cover how to grow on other platforms other than just Google. Because one thing, kind of my claim to fame, is that I started out on local SEO, but then I was like, okay, well, I need to start getting clients. And I know a lot of people are really concerned about getting clients, and they want to get a recurring, lead magnet going on, so people will contact them. And so I've actually been able to find a way to get a ton of clients and a ton of people interested in what I do by creating these free checklists and then bringing them into a community. And I'll kind of cover that in a second. But this template here, I'll just quickly overview it so you can kind of see. There are certain things that, again, like you're not going to want to do yourself. So like creating your account, about section, setting up your streaming, that's kind of stuff that obviously you're going to want to do yourself. But the things that you're not going to want to do yourself is like all the SEO that comes with YouTube. So, adding your end screens, doing your time stamping, adding things to playlists, testing your click-through rates, all this stuff that you're going to want to do for YouTube. Now, what I do is I actually take these templates and I hand them to people so that they can do the SEO part, that they can do the parts that I don't want to do. And I think that's one thing that's very important. If you're like me and you want to grow, this is like the first tip that I have. If you want to make sure that you're taking whatever you do, you write it down and you figure out who can do that for you. And if somebody else can't do it for you, maybe a robot can do it for you. So Jason, you probably know that I'm pretty into automation. So I spent over 6 months and thousands of dollars hiring these developers to actually make a script. This is a free script right here. And what it does is it lets you auto edit your videos. So normally, like when I found that when I would do a stream, I would have to send the video over to somebody to edit it. And instead of me having to do that, this script will actually edit the video for me. So if there's like pauses, or if I'm talking and then I'm kind of thinking, or I'm like, hey, let me pull up this template, those pauses in between, it just makes them instant. So it jump cuts to the parts that have silence. It takes away the silence so it looks like a really highly edited video. So that's kind of the first thing that I think about is, can I give this to somebody else, or can I have a robot do it? And if not, then yes, I should probably be doing that task. Now, the other question is this task a high value task or is it a low value task? So if I'm going on video and I do a video a day, which I try to do, is that something that's going to make me money based on my previous experience, or is it something that's not going to make me money based on my previous experience? To be honest, like most of us, the reason why we do things, at least business-wise, is because we're either trying to get better at the thing or we're trying to make more money. And for me, I'm trying to do both, obviously, but if it's not making me money, then the last thing I want to do is spend my time trying to do something that I know is not going to work. With that being said, let me just kind of
quickly, sorry,
yeah.
There are people in the audience asking where we can download the templates. I assume it's chasereiner.com, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, so I have the templates, I think, somewhere on my website. I will leave, if possible, I don't know if it's possible, but I can leave links in the description of this video, and that way I'll give it to everybody afterwards.
Brilliant.
So yeah.
So but that's something that will be shared afterwards at worst case scenario. You will find it in the description. So come back to this video and look at it later, and that link will be there. Go ahead.
Yeah, Chase. I actually wasn't sure if sharing this stuff was okay. I that's why I wasn't really, it will be in the description. Okay, cool. So let me just share the general layout with you, how I kind of funnel people. So step number one, what I do is I come up with a checklist. And really the easiest way to come up with a checklist, Jason, is just like figure out what your audience is interested in. And if you don't have an audience, then just figure out what other people's audiences are interested in. And then you figure out how can I automate that thing that they want. So a lot of people were really interested in local SEO because I did a lot of local SEO. So I made a local SEO template. Let me go bring that up so you can check that out. Hold on one second. Right here. So this local SEO template has a bunch of stuff in it, like client questionnaire. It has, where you'd put your business information. So when you're building your citations and everything, it has your keyword research tab. It has your competitor list, plugins, tools. So all the stuff that you'd want for local SEO, and then obviously like tutorials and everything for it. But ideally what I'm doing here is I'm not really, a lot of this stuff in the checklist I was actually looking up, right? So what I'll do is I'll figure out what people are interested in. So that I guess the step 0 would be identify what people are interested in. You create your checklist, and then you build an opt-in for that checklist. So, enter your email, and then you offer the checklist for, but okay, so one thing I will mention is that when people grab the checklist, I also funnel them to a group or to a YouTube subscriber, something like that. So just a good example of this is this checklist. When somebody goes to grab this checklist, there's an opt-in, and then it says, hey, make sure you go join the group around this checklist. So what I'm actually doing is I'm growing actually multiple groups right now around different things. So one of my main groups is this one. It's called the White Hat SEO Network. But when somebody grabs this local template, I'm not actually funneling them to this 30,000 member group. And you might be wondering why. The reason why I don't funnel them to this group is because I'm actually funneling them to a local SEO group that's hyper relevant to what they are, what they're looking for. So just like with this one, I have a YouTube group as well. And I actually automate these groups. And the reason why I automate groups is because, so at the beginning of this interview or presentation, we talked about, what's the biggest hack you can get to 10x your sales and your traffic. And the real answer to that is community. So when you start being able to build a community, this community will end up supporting you and engaging with your content, which in one of our last videos before this, Jason, we talked about what's the biggest ranking factor besides links. And my idea is that it's engagement. But how do you get engagement? You build a community. How do you build a community? You do it like this. So this is kind of like the missing piece to what the last thing is that we talked about. So here you can see local SEO pros. I've gotten over 700 people in here in the last couple of weeks just by taking this template and then having them join the group. And then I just ask one question? I mean, you don't force them to join the group in order to get the template. The template is free and easy to get, and then you encourage them. Is that correct? Right. So I think previously I did try saying, hey, if you want the template, go into the Facebook group. But now I believe the way it happens is it gives them the checklist, but then they can also, it says also make sure you join the group. So I did try different ways, but yeah. Now, so when I post about local SEO in this group, what I do is I actually automate my questions. So just like my YouTube automation template and my local SEO automation template, I also have a Facebook automation template. And let me actually bring that up for you so you can see that.
Okay.
1 second. Sorry, I got so many templates, and it might seem ridiculous, but they actually do really help me.
I'll bet you do. And I noticed that that's not the local SEO template. It's the new one, which means it's been updated.
Right. Yes, this is the new one, and it's specifically all the tutorials that I've made are all geared around a local website. So I'm actually like in these videos observing a local website and how and talking about why that specific website is ranking. And so I actually go over like examples of websites that have really good local SEO versus in the other template where it's more targeting like a national approach and talking about. So yeah. But this Facebook automation template isn't fully done yet. It's actually just it's one thing right now. And the reason why it's one thing is because it's probably the most important thing you can do in order to build your community. So let me talk about the main ranking factors. We talked about what I think the main ranking factors for Google are in the last presentation. Let me talk about what I think the main ranking factors for YouTube and Facebook are. Brilliant. And ideally, they're pretty similar to what Google has, in my opinion, but the idea is that everything ranks off of engagement these days, or that's what we think. Like if you look at kind of the updates that Google's been doing, they just released a recent update talking about how they're going to start looking at pages UX and and observing how people are interacting with those pages and actually using that as a ranking factor, at least with page speed and some other stuff. So I think these platforms having ranking factors way before Google that had to do with engagement. It seems like Google's starting to implement that, but YouTube's biggest thing is average session duration, click-through rate,
right?
How long people are watching your videos.
Can I just make two really quick points? Number one is that Facebook and YouTube are both closed gardens, so they have the data, so they can really measure this engagement. So that's obviously an incredibly strong signal for them. Google is not that walled garden. They're trying to judge the engagement on other channels, but all three of them are interested in the value that your content will bring to their users. And so engagement, whether or not they have mastered it today, is definitely the measure that these machines are moving towards, is saying, does your audience, does your real audience engage with your content? If it does, we're going to rank it because it's going to help us look good. Is that a fair comment?
I think that's definitely true. And that's kind of why I'm going to show a technique in here where I use one platform to almost predict what the other platform is going to do.
Oh, brilliant. Love it.
Yeah. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, 100%. And I think the more you can almost trick the algorithms to engage with your posts, the more those posts are going to be distributed to other people. So I don't know if this is still true, but a while back I read about something called EdgeRank, and what EdgeRank is supposed to do is it's a algorithm that Facebook has implemented, and I think YouTube has it as well, where the more people interact with your content, the more they're going to see it. So like you've probably seen this. If you go and like somebody's post on Facebook or you like their YouTube video, the next video you see is a video from them in your suggested feed. And that's not a coincidence. It's because these algorithms want to keep showing you what you're already interacting with. But the longer you don't interact with those videos, you start to see them kind of go away, and then eventually you don't see them at all. That's why you'll end up seeing people with huge Facebook groups or huge YouTube channels that only get a few hundred views per video. And then you'll see other people with just a few thousand subscribers or a few thousand people in their group, but they'll reach like 50% of their audience. But it's because the people that have lower audiences almost have a better chance of hitting their audience because that audience is new, it's recent, and people are it's almost like you have a leverage in a certain way. And that's one of the reasons why I build these sub niche groups, because I know that these people are new and they're fresh and they're people that are engaging. And so if I make hyper relevant content based on the thing that they engage with last, the chances are they're going to see that next thing.
And there is a question there. I mean, it begs the question of staleness. I mean, the staleness of your users or your subscribers is going to play into the algorithm. And you mentioned big subscriber bases, and yet they're not engaging. That's a stale subscriber base.
Yeah, and I think there are ways that you can warm it up. So I've seen people that have completely dead channels or dead groups that they are able to really warm up, and that's kind of the idea of what I was going to show you in this automation for Facebook is
brilliant.
So one thing that's really important to realize is that the more you kind of stray off your topic. So if I started making a bunch of content around, let's say, Mac repair, and I'm really known for SEO, I'm going to stop getting as many people watching. But then what happens is, because less people are watching, my main audience that normally watches is going to not be recommended my content as much, because they didn't even interact with that kind of content in the first place. They didn't subscribe to that. So if you start warming up your audience by making a bunch of content based on what the best performing content you have is, you start getting back to that original like view count that you were getting. This actually recently happened to me and a couple people I know, where they started getting off topic, trying new things. That's actually what I was doing, is I was trying to go into a different sort of like angle. But because my channel is so based around, the same with my group, is so based around a certain topic, if I go off topic, it's really hard to get traction on that, rather than if I was starting a brand new channel that was off topic and the people subscribed initially for that thing, if that makes sense.
Right. Yes, sure. 100%. I mean, and there is that question of kind of topicality, is staying on topic enables these machines to push people towards the topic, your topic, or the experts within the topic, which is you, that's going to interest people who are interested in that topic. And they're all aiming to do that. I mean, Google Discover is an amazing new example. they're pushing that out, and they're looking at topic layers, and they're saying Chase Reiner is an expert in SEO, and they're going to push people towards you much in the same way that Facebook and YouTube do that now.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. I honestly haven't spent a ton of time looking at Google Discover. I know what it is, but I'm super interested to see if that kind of ends up being like the main way they distribute content. One thing that,
Sorry, I was just going to, I mean, I listened to Dan Taylor talk about it earlier this afternoon. We had a webinar here in Paris, and Jez Schultz, there are two great references, and they're both saying, you know, this is push notifications in a similar manner to Facebook, in a similar manner to YouTube, and Discover is Google's push search, social kind of aspect, which is going to be phenomenally interesting, but it's still young and definitely still growing, and not a major focus, I would have thought, for anybody, much more Facebook, Twitter, YouTube.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think that's like complete, like we could go so deep into what would end up happening there, but I really do think that it's just another way for them to kind of capitalize on sort of
Brilliant.
what it seems like they're going towards, which is the new like engagement-based ranking system. But anyways, so
but sorry, just to pay you a compliment, that feeds 100% into what you've been saying the last 3 episodes. It's all about engagement. It's all about making great content that your audience engages with, and that these machines see and understand that your audience are engaging with.
100%. Yep. So one thing that I do is I'll go on Semrush and I'll start looking up keywords around, let me actually do it really quick. I'll start looking up keywords around SEO or whatever the topic is of my, whatever I want to become an influencer for or build a community around.
Right.
And so I'll go to the keyword research. I'll type something like SEO. And I like the part I like about Semrush here is that they have the keyword magic tool that gives you all the questions. So if I go here, it gives me all the things people ask. And so these are things that people are asking on YouTube, on Facebook groups, on Google. And I think people, one thing that you might want to think about is like, if your niche is really saturated, like SEO is very hard to rank for because so many people who do SEO want to rank for SEO. Whereas in Facebook or YouTube, the difficulty becomes lower because less people are competing there because they don't spend as much time doing Facebook or YouTube as they do on Google. So that's kind of like, I think why I had a more unique edge when I started out is that I kind of identified this early on. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to compete on YouTube because nobody else is competing there. Another example is like, you know, nobody's doing SEO videos on TikTok. Is that a niche to target? I don't know. But I do know that anytime you're competing with everybody else, the amount of profit you make from that generally goes down because it's harder to win. So I'd rather go for the things that I can win more easily at. And one thing that I've realized is that Facebook groups right now is kind of like the new YouTube because everybody's starting to get into YouTube now. But Facebook groups, I've been able to grow Facebook groups and automate them so easily because there's so many things that you can do to get an edge that's super easy. Whereas like in probably a few years from now, everybody's going to be using Facebook groups, I think, and it's going to be a lot harder to get the same traction with the method that I'm going to show you. So what you can do is you can actually take, like, let's say you had a group about white hat SEO, or you had a group about local SEO or e-commerce SEO, whatever somebody's interested in. The idea is you want to kind of niche down so that it's more hyper, like the more you have topical authority around something very specific, the easier it is to keep hitting those same people that are interested in that subject rather than just talking about SEO as a whole. And then you're just talking about a bunch of stuff like, you know, white hat SEO, black hat SEO. And then people, it's kind of harder to hit the same people over and over. So if you can be very specific and then you can kind of broaden out as you get more people. But an example is, so if I type in SEO, I can look for things that people are looking for, like let's say link building SEO. And then I find all the questions about links. Now, if I have a group or I have a YouTube channel, let's just go to group. If I had a group and I take all of these different questions around links, I can plug it into my template here. And let's just call this the link building SEO group. Let's just say I made a new one, right? Mm-hmm. This is going to tie back into the checklist in a second because I really I think this is really cool, and it's something that I can almost assure you will bring you clients and bring you sales and bring you a way bigger audience if you're trying to get more views and more traffic. So let's say we have a group called Link Building SEO Pros, and we just take all these questions and we load them in here. Now, I can actually see what the most search for topics are. So this is going to be something that a lot of people will probably respond to. Now, all I have to do is, so what I'll do is in my groups is I'll take a question, I'll load these up before, and I'll actually alter them a little bit so they're not just like the exact searches. So instead of saying how to do link baiting SEO, I'd be like, is link baiting SEO a strategy that works? Something that may be a little bit more catered. And every day I will take one of these questions and I'll just put it next to it just so I know I asked it before, and I'll copy it and I'll put it in a group. Now, why am I doing this? The truth is, because engagement is such a strong ranking factor, not only do you get the same people that you hit before, but if you have a brand new group that nobody's in, if they see even like, if Facebook sees that there's even 10 people engaging with a post and there's like 20 people in the group, it's going to recommend organically the group to more people. So you can see here, I asked this an hour ago, should SEOs write their own content? It's already hit 1.6 thousand people, 13 comments. Some of my older stuff, like yesterday, has 7.1 thousand people reach 145 comments. So because I get such good engagement on these posts, what happens is this group gets crazy recommended to other people. In just the last 2 days, I think we got 236 new people in this group. Now, if I wasn't getting any engagement at all, I wouldn't get more organic reach with this group. And so all I have to do is really just ask questions. Now, when people come into the group, one cool thing that you can do is you can go to your members tab and it'll let you welcome people in bulk. So you can see I just did a welcome post like 10 minutes ago. There's already 14 new people in here. So when I write a welcome post, this will actually welcome 14 new people. It'll tag them and put a notification in their Facebook. And I can say, hey, make sure you check out the free checklist we have about local SEO. And when they go to the local SEO checklist, guess what? It takes them over to the local SEO group. So I'm just funneling people from one place to the other, but this isn't the magic thing that I want to show you. We could go all day into Facebook groups and YouTube and all the other stuff that I've already built these templates for. The real secret sauce is figuring out, first of all, again, going back to what we were talking about, figuring out what people are interested in. And what you do is you build the checklist, you build the opt-in, and then you build the group. And the cool thing is that when I'm building this stuff, I can take it from one place to another. So this doesn't have to be just my own group. It doesn't have to be just my own YouTube channel. Like for instance, Jason, you have a podcast that you do, and on that podcast, anytime you interview people about a certain subject like link building or black hat SEO, you could have your own checklist. And that person probably has an audience. Like the people that you interview, a lot of those people, the reason why they're being interviewed is because they have something to be interviewed about, meaning that people are probably following them. So when you have some sort of free thing and people are getting sent over from their audience to your stuff, and those people, for instance, see these checklists, just like right now, people are watching this video, they're like, oh my God, I didn't know Chase had all these checklists, or I didn't even know who Chase was. They're going to want to go grab that. And now I'm integrating those people into my audience just by offering free value. So one thing that I'll actually do in these groups is I'll identify influencers. For instance, like if I wanted to be really known for, let's say I made a new checklist for YouTube. All I have to do is type in YouTube SEO, go look at the groups that are already doing well, go to groups, and if there's anything around YouTube SEO, I'm not really sure. Maybe it's just YouTube or marketing.
There might possibly just be you.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
You're just so good at it. You're getting at the top every time, right?
Okay, so Twitch and YouTube gaming is a group, YouTube channel promotion. And so when you go into these groups, you can start doing the same strategy where you can start asking questions like the ones I showed you. You can load it up from Semrush and look for all the questions around YouTube. And as people start to engage with you, you start becoming known in that group. And then you can reach out to the admins, which is really easy to do because when you add them as a friend or you message them or you comment on their post, say, hey, I DM'd you, you have access to their instant messenger. So I've been able to get in contact with crazy people, all kinds of people that I never thought I'd be able to get in contact with just by doing this. And then you can say, hey, I have a free checklist in your group. I've been engaging. I've been finding that, people have been having problems with this. Would you mind if I shared it? And you could even send them over the checklist. And now all the people going over to that checklist are opting in and going to your group. And that's how you start building an audience like that. And really it all starts with identifying the interest, And then what I'll do is I'll just do a search on it. So if I know that people are interested in YouTube SEO, or I want to build a group around link building, all I have to do is look up like link building guide 2021, and I just turn it into a checklist. I just see what's out there. Oh, look, there's one from Semrush right here. I go, okay, yeah, there's all these different things. How can I make this into a checklist? And then if I can add little videos to it, make it more helpful. And then I just make a free opt-in and I funnel people to me. But again, the reason why we're talking about all of this in the first place today, Jason, is because in the first videos, we talked about SEO without link building. We talked about building rankings. We talked about the principles of building engagement. But the best, quickest way to build engagement is by having an audience. And the only way you're going to start growing an audience is by giving them something valuable that they want for free. I do this with checklists. Some people do it with podcasts. Some people do it with, videos. There's all kinds of different ways that you can give away value. But one thing that I want to say to people is that if you don't have a group that you're funneling people to, and you don't have some sort of high value checklist or something that's like kind of behind the scenes that they can get as extra value, like this interview that we're doing right now, it's valuable to people because they can see what's possible. But if I didn't have something for people to opt into, then I'm losing a huge audience that I could be funneling to my own stuff to get them following me. Right. And so I think that's kind of like the presentation that I wanted to share today.
Yeah, brilliant. So I mean, you're looking for a way to get people to stick. I mean, obviously, I'm on this webinar talking to you, learning from you. There is a reason for people to then go and look for you, look you up, stick to you. There isn't a reason for anybody to actually do that with me. So my mistake is exactly that. It's there's no hook.
Well, you do have the hook of the podcast if people want to watch it or listen to it. And so people are going to subscribe to that because they want to hear more. I think the one thing though is like at least for me, I want to figure out ways to get as much traction with one thing as possible. So if I'm going to be doing a video, how many people can I reach by doing one video? And I know the best way to reach more people is to give them value and almost be able to remarket to them later. And the problem is having people on just one platform. Like for instance, my YouTube channel has 40,000 subscribers. What do I get? 1,000 to 2,000 views a video if I'm lucky. So in my Facebook group, the reach is like 10 to 20,000 per post just by asking a question or posting something. And the truth is that the people in that Facebook group I still have more people that I could reach. So then I funnel them to a local SEO group that's more highly targeted. So when I start creating, it's almost like categorization with your blog or with your website. The more you can kind of categorize what you're doing, the higher chance you're going to get that reaching more people, whether it's ranking or people that are just interested in that category, because you're being way more hyper relevant with your targeting.
Well, so you create a video. You were saying earlier on you create one video per day, and that's for your YouTube channel, and it's based on the idea of the questions that you can then push out onto the Facebook groups. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. So this is actually what I wanted to talk about. So thank you for reminding me. So on Facebook, those questions that I ask, what I can do is I can start looking through them and I can see that if enough people interact and enough people are engaging with that on Facebook, it almost predicts how the YouTube algorithm is going to do. Right. So if I do a post on Facebook and I say, hey, what do you guys think about local SEO? Or what's the best local SEO tips? Let's say only like 10% of people respond. But then I do another post and it's like, is mobile SEO the top ranking factor for local? And then let's say 30 or 40% of the audience responds and they're all engaging. Then I know that if I make a post about that, it's going to do really well. So you can actually use one platform like Facebook and actually have that predict how the audience is going to interact on your YouTube video. One thing I also want to mention is that it's not just about building opt-ins and building ways for people to get funneled to a community, but it's also thinking about how can I repurpose my content from one place to another. And that's part of the reason why I build these checklists. Right. Because I know if I can do a YouTube video and I can completely or almost automate it, then I can take that time that I'm spending normally like editing the video and doing all the things that I have to do to push that video out and get it seen. I can then give that task to somebody else and start thinking about, okay, well, once that video is done, what's the next part that I can automate? And I'm like, okay, well, in a Facebook group, I could post it as a native video, and then I could do this. And then I start building that checklist out. And then eventually what happens is I just have to do a video, and I have other people taking that video and chopping it up and putting it here and taking the podcast and putting it on. But again, it has to, well, at least for me, I have to do one thing at a time. And the checklists have allowed me to do that. And they have allowed me to also help a lot of other people, because I think a lot of my audience kind of has a hard time knowing about which step to do first. Mm-hmm. And so the checklists don't just help me, they help the audience that I'm building. And I think content,
Yeah, but I mean, people are looking kind of for somebody to tell them, do this, do that, do that, do that. And at least you're moving forward. I was talking to Barry Adams, who's a very smart Dutch SEO guy, who was saying, every time you move forward, you're moving forward a tiny bit. It's like the British cycling team is famous for this, for the fact that they were rubbish. And then little by little, they improved tiny, tiny things and ended up being the best in the world. But is that the idea, is to say you do one thing at a time and you don't expect anything to completely explode your traffic, but each piece you bring to the puzzle is going to help you?
Yeah, I think you kind of said it earlier. That was a really good point, Jason, is that it took like a couple years. It wasn't just overnight that I started getting results. You look at a lot of the people that are really successful on YouTube, and people have these massive communities, and you think, wow, they must have gotten so lucky. But I mean, it's just years and years and years of failing and trying to figure out what works. And a lot of it also just has to come down to like your personality and how you see things. Because even if I wake up and I think, hey, I know what I'm going to do today, I still don't fully know. And I think that's one thing that people would benefit from if they kind of took to heart, is understanding that you never really fully know. You kind of just do the next best thing that you know how to do.
Brilliant. Right. Okay. Now we're going to move into the questions. We've got a couple coming in. Please. I think Chase has shared an enormous amount already, but if you've got questions, please do ask them. And Haven Connect is going a bit mad. He or she is asking loads of questions, and I'm terribly interested in the first one, which is, you obviously have people working for you. Do you do the task yourself and then figure out how you can pass it on to somebody else? Is that the trick?
Yeah, I think that's also very important. I talked to a guy recently who runs it's called onlinejobs.ph. It was like the original Fiverr almost. I think Fiverr kind of replicated what they were doing. And he has like 27 VAs, like something ridiculous. Yeah, and they're all like micro VAs where they all do like one thing. And I was like so fascinated. It's the only reason why I started really building this stuff, because I'm like, so you have how many VAs? I only had like a support person help me with my email. And I was like, this is fascinating. So he said,
sorry, go ahead. Finish what you're saying. I've got another question, but go ahead.
Yeah. So what he said is, don't automate anything that you don't know how to do. So like, last thing I'm going to do is try to make a template for Instagram. I don't know about Instagram or like TikTok, but I know about local SEO. I know about Facebook groups. I know about YouTube. So that's where I'm spending my time, trying to automate that stuff. And then eventually, and this is what he said, is like, you can learn about new stuff, but learn it first, figure out how to do it yourself, and then give it to other people.
Which is absolutely brilliant. I think that's really good advice. I mean, until you've done it yourself, you don't really know what needs to be done. And you can't tell somebody else or a machine what it needs to do and what its aim is. I mean, with machines and in fact people, is you're saying, what's the aim of what you're trying to do? And here's the path towards it. And another question, Haven Connect once again, how much time do you spend doing community building? Because you talked a lot about community. Is that something you cannot pass off to somebody else?
I think a certain amount of it you can. So like, for instance, automating those questions has been really big for me. Engaging with the people in my group as well. I have somebody that will help me answer questions and help assist people, because a lot of the times people will ask the same questions, but they do just want to connect. They just want to talk to you. So I try to stay away from like, oh, check this question's already been asked, go search for it. Like, people, they just ask questions because they want to connect. So yeah, I think a lot of the community building I do myself manually, but it's generally things that I have to actually be in front of the camera for. So I spend most of my time being in front of this camera. And the reason why I spend so much time in front of this camera is nobody else can be me. And I found that that's really the best use of my time is like doing, like, I'll do live SEO class or Zoom classes. So I'll train people on Zoom. I'll do YouTube videos. I'll take like pictures and I'll do live streams. But the more time I can spend focusing on being me, the more time that I'm spending my time doing something that's priceless rather than something that I could pay somebody else to do. And it's not that I don't want to do those things, but at a certain point, as you scale, you have so many people trying to interact with you. It's just not possible.
Right. Okay. And that leads us on to Allied Construction, who's asking, where do you find these people, the 27 PAs on Upwork? I mean, Upwork, from my point of view, I mean, I don't know anything about it. I've never employed anyone on Upwork. I kind of perceive it as being cheap and cheerful, but not very reliable. How do you get a PA who's reliable?
That's a really good question. I kind of just roll the dice. I put posts out there in my groups and I say, hey, is anybody interested in doing something like this? And I think the quickest way to find whether somebody's good or not is just give them a micro task and give them something very specific. So like, hey, can you edit this photo for me? Or can you do this? And then really, like, the thing that I gauge is not even necessarily how good they are at something, but how quick they are at it and whether or not they can think for themselves. Because I'm not, yeah.
Sorry, no, there is the question of being on time, doing the job well, being able to think for oneself and not completely rely on you to tell them exactly what needs to be done. But also, one thing that struck me there is you said you're reaching out to your community. It's people who want to work with you as a person, and that's interpersonal relationships.
Yeah, I have a lot of people that offer to help me with audits and all kinds of stuff, like, because they just want to learn. And to be honest with you, I don't even really necessarily want free help. A lot of people offer me free help. Yeah. I'd much rather just pay somebody and have it done quickly and then not have to like really deal with it, where I found that people that want to help for free are more trying to learn and almost get a mentorship, which I have nothing against mentoring people. It just becomes really hard to manage your time when you're dealing with a ton of people. Like, I'd rather just have a transactional system where I know I pay $5 and I get a result. Yeah.
Right, brilliant. And another question there then, if we're talking about 27 PAs, obviously that's quite extreme, but it's a good example because it's where you can end up. Don't you just then end up spending your entire time managing the 27 PAs and never actually doing anything interesting? So your job actually becomes phenomenally boring.
I think honestly, I should get you connected, Jason, with this guy, because I think you'd have a fascinating podcast with him. But I asked the exact same question. Hold on, sorry. Can you phrase the question one more time? It was, well,
I mean, from my point of view, I actually employed 14 people at one point. I was a blue dog in a cartoon, and that was my thing. And I really loved being the blue dog in a cartoon. I was creating these cartoons, but we had a company and we were creating all this content. We were managing 60 million visits a year to a kid's site. And I ended up just managing the people who were doing the jobs that I could no longer do. And I suddenly sat down one day and thought, I'm not a blue dog anymore in a cartoon doing the things I love. I'm just managing people. How do you stop that happening? Because I wish I'd been able to do it.
Yeah, so the thing that he told me, which was really interesting, and I've been kind of finding for my own VAs right now, is that they end up managing each other. So I'll put one in charge as like the supervisor and say, hey, can you cross-check this person? And I just give them really micro tasks though. I've definitely tried this from an SEO standpoint, and it was hectic, where I had somebody trying to do the content, and it was just like, I was constantly having to check everything. But with the stuff that I've been doing, which is automating my YouTube, automating my Facebook group, and automating my email, their only job is to respond to people, and do like a couple extra things. So I try to just break it down to really, really specific tasks. And then the because the responsibility is so small, I don't end up having to pay a lot of money for it. And that way, like, I know that the job is like, I'd rather have 27 VAs doing very micro things than like 3 VAs doing what the more general things would be.
Brilliant. I mean, and once again, I mean, I come back to when I was an employer. I mean, I used to say to people, if you're doing 50% of things you don't like, that's not a good job. It's not helping me. It's not helping you. We need to make sure that at least 50% of what you do is something you actually enjoy. And Captivate Company has asked the question, where do you find the people to develop the automation for that kind of things? Because if somebody comes to me and says, I actually don't like this part of my job, my response was, let's try and automate it. Where do you find people who can do that? I'm sure it's not on
Fiverr?
I can't remember. Yes, thank you, Fiverr.
Yeah, well, so the VA stuff definitely can't be automated. So like when it comes to responding to people's comments and being personal and building a community, that's something that's very hard to do. There are certain things like the auto editing with the video you can do. What I'll do is I'll actually look up people that are making tutorials on YouTube, and I'll find the ones that sometimes have less subscribers, or maybe you can tell they might have more free time, and I'll reach out to those people. That's the person who actually built my editing script for the video. Is I looked up how to make this thing, and somebody popped up like 2,000 views on it, and I made a comment. I said, hey, can I hire you? So I found that the best talent is generally people who are already doing tutorials and explaining how to do the thing.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of the stuff that we want to do is already being done by somebody, but not necessarily terribly visible. And the secret is to find the brilliant stuff. And Haven Connect is also asking, do you funnel people from one medium to another? For example, from Facebook to YouTube or vice versa? I mean, I asked you about YouTube to Facebook, but isn't the thing about Facebook is you can ask all these questions, see which ones ping people's interests, and then make the video.
Yeah, so that's kind of the strategy is I'll pique the interest, I'll ask the question, and I'll say, hey, what's the most important ranking factor for local SEO? Get a bunch of people interested, a bunch of people interacting with my post, but then I'll go out and make the video and post it in the group, and then a bunch of people go over to it. Because that's the thing that's most important is the thing that people focus on. So if recently I lost a bunch of Pokemon cards, I was so sad. I did a move and I looked up the value because they're trending right now, and the packs that I had are now worth anywhere between $1,000 to $2,000 each. And I had, I don't know, 10 or 12 packs, and I had a whole stack of cards that were, anyways, I lost these cards and I was really bummed, but I couldn't stop focusing on it. And so it was very important to me, right? Not just because it was a lot of money, but because I just kept focusing on it. I started looking up, I started looking on eBay, and it was the most, and I realized I'm like, while I could be working and helping people and doing the things that I like doing, I'm so focused on this thing that it's now the most important thing in my life. And so I almost take that same principle and I apply it to like groups or YouTube. And I think, okay, well, if I can create a lot of engagement, a lot of interest around a certain subject, by the time I release a video on that, I can funnel a ton of people from that thing that's been almost positioned as the most important thing at the time. And then I find that it brings a lot of people over because we've been talking so much about it.
Right. And I mean, this might be pushing this a little bit too far, but at the time I'm looking for something on Google or I'm hanging out on Facebook, there is always one overriding thing that's the most important for me at that exact moment. Is that a secret to hitting or getting people involved?
And what do you mean by it's the most important thing at that moment?
Well, I mean, for example, you were saying, well, my Pokemon cards, I've got this problem right now, and it's obsessing me. And you were terribly keen on that. Anybody who had got you involved in their community at that exact moment has probably got your attention for a long time to come.
Right. So what you're saying is that the thing that you've been focusing on is something that you want to act on, but you're not fully sure about whether or not there's a solution to it?
Yeah, I expressed that very badly. I do apologize. Sorry, what I mean is a lot of the people who come into your groups are focusing on that exact moment.
Right.
And the key moment is when they think it's the most important thing. And once you've got them in the group or they've come into the group, then you can start doing what you were saying earlier on, which is helping them and moving them forwards within that. But the key moment, and I'm making this up as I go along, but it's saying the key moment is when it's critical for you.
Right. And I think that's also part of the reason why it's so important to really kind of topic down, because
Oh, right, brilliant. Yes.
because it's not just about the search engine and how Google sees you, it's about the users. And if you start creating interest in all these different things, people stop becoming interested, not just because you're talking about a bunch of different stuff, but because you built up so much hype for one thing that they go, well, where did the other thing go? Somebody actually asked me the other day, they said, Chase, because I kept trying to build all these new things. They're like, Chase, what would you do if YouTube came out with a new version of YouTube every month? And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, if YouTube was now a different platform. And I was like, well, I'd get annoyed, right? And the truth is, how many of us are trying to create all these new angles in our businesses when we already have an angle that is proven to work, that people like, and that if we just stuck to it, we would get a ton of traction with. But I think what happens is people almost get bored, or they get worried that doing the same thing isn't going to keep working. But if it's worked before, why isn't going to? The other thing that I realized as well, Jason, is that I've always been trying, I always in my mind, for some reason, I thought everybody who's seeing me right now is everybody who's been seeing me for the last 4 years. But the truth is, if you look at my analytics, or I look at my stuff, most of the people that watch my stuff month over month, it's like 70% new people, maybe even more. And a lot of the reason why people are watching my stuff in the first place is because they're trying to learn so that they don't have to keep learning. I mean, think about it. When I said earlier, I said, I was watching Brian Dean, I was watching Neil Patel. Am I watching them now? No, not because I don't think they're interesting. It's just because I'm so focused on my own stuff now, and I've learned all I need to learn to be able to move forward. So I think it is really important to think about the new person, keep helping people that are brand new, because a lot of the people that have been watching for a while, even though they're still valuable, they're not going to stick around forever. And I mean, some of them might, but
yeah, no, sure, sorry, and basically you're a stepping stone to something new, and your idea is give them a fishing rod and they can go and fish for themselves, and that's the best way to do it. And one thing, I think the kickback from that, in inverted commas, would be that they will then say, I learned from Chase Reiner, to their audience, and that's a snowball effect. Is that a fair assessment?
100%. And I think that's the reason why so many people vouch for people like Neil Patel and Brian Dean, because they focus so much on the newer person that it's so funny, because you see how many people will say, oh, they just give the most basic stuff, but that's who they're targeting. They're targeting people that are new. The people that have been watching them forever, yeah, but why are you still watching them? They're supposed to be a stepping stone. How many people will say, yeah, I started out by watching Neil Patel, I started out by watching whoever, and now they're where they're at, which is like in SEO Pro or whatever they're doing. So I don't know. I think that's one other thing as well, is, people are so quick to judge what other people are doing for their marketing, when I try not to almost look at like the people who are successful as a negative thing. I try to think about what's the thing that they're doing well. Why are they performing so well when I'm doing all these technical videos, I'm trying to become very specific and change new angles all the time. Why am I not performing like them? And the answer is because I'm targeting the wrong audience.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, can we come back? I mean, that's obviously kind of marketing-y, audience-y kind of stuff. People are asking about the automation of your tasks. I mean, and it is an interesting question. They're saying, is it JavaScript? Is it APIs? Is it cron jobs? That's kind of like, how can I put it? It's mysterious for a lot of us. It's saying, how do you automate?
So I'm constantly looking for new ways to automate, whether it's through giving people tasks, making the checklist, or finding tools. What I do is I just generally, so like with this YouTube template, I'll show you, there's not that many things. And it's funny because if you look at my YouTube template versus my SEO template, there's so much more automation because I have so much more experience with it.
Right.
So like with the local template, you'll see on the right, there's almost a tool for every tab: Google Analytics, Bing Webmaster Tools, Squarespace, Semrush, Surfer SEO. So I have all these different things that I'm like, okay, I can automate my internal links with this thing, or I can automate my SEO with Yoast. Where with my YouTube template, it's only a couple. It's like, okay, this is the thing I used to stream with. This is where I buy my recording equipment. This is my auto editor. And then I use TubeBuddy, and TubeBuddy like helps you automate your tags on YouTube. But when it comes to when it comes to automation, I think one of the big things is like thinking about, can I have somebody else do it? Can I find a tool for it? Or can I, and so I'll just search this stuff, what's the best way to set up a thumbnail or something? And then something will pop up and I'll go and learn it. It's always
you test the tool and you see if it actually does what it promises to do. And I think that was part of the misunderstanding, is that you don't just develop tools yourself. You point to tools that already exist, or resources that already exist that can help people, which means that this idea that you're developing vast numbers of tools is not true. You're not reinventing the wheel.
Right. And I try to just stick to like a couple things that I know will work, and I'm not like going out and buying hundreds of tools. I think one other thing that happens is that people get so distracted with tools and tricks and tips, and it's like at a certain point you just got to figure out what works for you, which is why I think it's so important to almost build a checklist for yourself, not even to give away to other people to get a group and grow your opt-ins, but because it just helps you figure out what are the things that I need to do. And which of these things are high value tasks versus low value tasks. Like one thing that we all need to do is, if we're doing a video, we need to have a good thumbnail, or we need to have whatever. But should I be spending 20 minutes building a thumbnail that I can pay somebody a couple dollars to do? And the truth is, no.
Yeah. Well, can I add a point about the thumbnail, which I found really interesting, is I shouldn't be spending my time building thumbnails because it takes me time, but also because a graphic designer will do it so much better.
Right. 100%. Yeah. And I think that's one thing, is you don't want to undervalue other people's, what they do as well. Because for me, I don't even know how to build a thumbnail. I have somebody do them for me, not just because I don't want to spend my time on it, but it's because that's all they do. So I want to help contribute. I want to help take something that somebody else is better than me at and have them help me, because I know that they specialize in it and I'm not really the person to do that thing. And it just comes down to focus, because we talk about building the same topics and building the same interests that people are going to want to see something for. But we also need to think about building our own skills. The moment we start going in and trying to do 500 different things, we're no longer specialized in that one thing. Like Jason's probably 100 times better at interview. I mean, I know he is, because he's way better at asking questions than I am.
And you're better at answering them, apparently.
I don't know about that, but I know that I don't have as much experience doing podcasting as Jason does. So I would rather, if possible, take something like what we're doing with Jason and have somebody else do it for me, right? Somebody else ask the questions, because I only want to specialize in what I do, which is mainly like video and building communities.
Right. Okay. And can I ask one last question, because we've got 1 minute left, and it really is on that topic of giving or asking people to do jobs that they know how to do. It's really helpful. I mean, we were talking earlier on, is you go through a process to learn how to do it. You learn how to do it, perhaps not incredibly well, but you learn how to do it so you know what you're asking other people to do for you, and you know what their problems are, you know what their issues are, and you know where they're going with it and what you're actually asking them. Is that fair?
Yes, 100%.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. Wonderful. Now, just actually, I said it was the last question, but it isn't, because I've got one last question about kind of the platforms. You're saying you've done Facebook, you've done YouTube. You mentioned Instagram, and you said, I'm not going there, or you're not going there, you're not there yet. Is it somewhere you're going to be going? Do you think that's an interesting platform for you to be moving on to? I
mean, I'd love to. I talked to Neil Patel the other day. I somehow got him on my channel. I don't know how, but I was like, is it in our interest to be on Instagram or to be on TikTok? And he's like, it's not that you shouldn't be on these platforms. You should be on all these platforms. It's just about figuring out how to be on all these platforms at once. Right. Because that is like, it's what we've been talking about. At a certain point in time, you can only do so much. And so it's really hard to do everything. And I think, again, it's like partnering up. We were talking about with, podcasting or whatever, is find the people that can help you do this stuff that already know about how to do it. And that's the thing that I'm still trying to figure out for myself.
Yeah, I mean, what I've understood from what you've said is that you figure it out, you write a checklist, you pass the work on to other people, and you move on to the next one. And that's an absolutely beautiful approach to pushing out, getting 10 times more traffic and 10 times more sales online. Thank you very much, Chase. I think we've made an amazing webinar. I think people will have got a lot out of this. Have you got anything to say as a closing statement?
I'm good. Thank you, though.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you to everybody for watching. Please, you can watch this back if you want to. Lots of incredibly interesting insights from Chase in the first half, looking over his shoulder, watching what he does, like you're in the room with him, and a second half of lots of great questions from the public, from you, the audience. Thank you very much to Semrush for organizing this. Thank you to Kate for being the technical expert behind it. Thank you to Anton for setting it all up. See you next time.
See you guys.